The microphone hit the floor, and the sound cracked through the room like a plate breaking at a funeral. Glasses stilled mid-air. The band's piano note hung and died. My brother Michael stood under a halo of warm light, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And across the room near the champagne fountain stood the man I'd invited, the one my sister-in-law had been whispering to on late-night calls, and his wife beside him, white-knuckled and shaking. Vanessa, perfect hair, perfect posture, stared at the unexpected guests like she'd seen a ghost. I watched her throat move as she swallowed. The microphone rolled in a wide, lazy circle and stopped by her heel. A woman at table 3 whispered, "Oh my God," and someone else dropped a fork. I'd always believed truth arrived like a sunrise, gently letting the world come back into colour. I was wrong. Truth sometimes arrives like a storm siren, forcing everyone to choose between running for cover or standing still to watch the damage. Before you judge me, hear this. I didn't do what I did because I enjoyed destruction. I did it because real love deserves light. Because my brother is the kind of man who still opens doors and still fixes gutters and still believes that vows are a promise you speak with your life. And I could not watch him pour himself into a mirage. So yes, when the chaos bloomed, I was the one who had planted the seed. But that night began long before the lights and the speeches. It began in smaller places, a kitchen, a phone call, a laugh that didn't sound like the ones we knew. And if I'm going to tell you what happened, I have to start at our table, where my family always believed good food and good faith could fix anything. My name is Natalie. I grew up in a house where the thermostat was never quite right, where my mother's cornbread smelled like butter and patience, and where we learned to say, "Tell me what you need," before we learned to say, "I'm fine." Sundays were sacred. Coffee bubbling in the old percolator, my father's soft gospel records, the scrape of chairs as we all sat and passed bowls without asking twice. Michael is 3 years older. He's steady in the ways that matter and forgetful in the ways that don't. He will remember to rotate your tires and forget his own birthday. After our father passed, he slid into the role of quiet anchor. If a hose burst, he had a wrench. If you called at midnight, he said, "I'm already in the truck." When he brought Vanessa home for the first time, my mother folded her into the kitchen like she was already ours. Vanessa had a soft, deliberate way of speaking, like she chose her words with tweezers. She worked in marketing at a boutique agency, Downtown Stories and Strategy. She liked to say, and she smelled faintly of citrus and good decisions. She knew how to set a table, how to remember names, how to linger in a conversation just long enough to make you feel interesting. Their wedding was all warm light and lace. My favourite photograph is the one where Michael looks at her the way our dad once looked at our mum when she pulled a pie from the oven hungry, and in awe. They bought a Craftsman with a wrap-around porch, and on early evenings you could find them there, Vanessa pruning pots of rosemary, while Michael tuned the radio to the ball game. They didn't have children, but they had a well-fed calendar. Friends, work dinners, volunteer committees, long weekends upstate. Their house became the orbit of our gatherings, birthdays, holidays, the kind of Tuesdays that called for soup. Inside their home, every detail told a story about care. The coat rack by the door held a rotation of cardigans and denim jackets. The fridge held a grid of sticky notes and a magnet that read "Be kind," ruined from some thrift store find. The hallway smelled faintly of vanilla and Murphy oil soap. On the mantel, a wedding photo. Next to it, a tiny clay bowl I made in 7th grade. They kept it without irony. That's the kind of detail families use as proof. See, we're real. We keep each other's small things. If trouble tried to signal itself, it did so in a frequency I wasn't yet tuned to hear. We had inside jokes about burnt toast and my mum's stubborn thermostat. At Thanksgiving, Michael handled the turkey with the seriousness of a surgeon while Vanessa floated through the kitchen, tapping my shoulder, asking, "Nat, where did you put the nutmeg?" She laughed easily, then full-bodied, head tipped, eyes bright. She teased Michael about how he lined up utensils with a ruler, and he winked and said, "Precision is love." But families learn to read each other's weather, and by last spring the air felt different, not colder, exactly. Vanessa's laughter became lighter at the edges, like something was holding it back. Michael grew tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. I told myself they were busy. Work, ebbs and floods. People drift in and out of their best selves. Then one Sunday, while the afternoon light laid itself across the dining table like a clean sheet, Michael brought up the idea of a vow renewal. 7 years, he said, half smiling, half wincing from a headache. Lucky number, right? Maybe it's time to look each other in the eye and say, "I still choose you." Vanessa's reaction was immediate and shining. "Let's do it big," she said. A garden party, string lights. Live piano, everyone we love in one place. She stood and kissed the top of his head like a benediction. Let's make it beautiful. We started planning the way our family plans, with lists, leftovers, and overlapping opinions. I helped with stationery because I have neat handwriting. Mum offered to handle desserts because sugar is her love language. Michael handled the rentals because he trusts anything with measurements. Vanessa took the helm. She compared fabric swatches to sunlight, took photos of chair backs in different angles, argued lovingly with the florist about peonies versus ranunculus. She was gracious to vendors and generous with praise. Watching her work felt like watching her old self again, a woman who could take a half idea and turn it into a room people didn't want to leave. And yet, a quiet thing had started in me. Maybe it was the way she kept her phone face down during dinner. Maybe it was how she stepped into the hallway to take calls and came back smelling faintly of someone else's cologne, warm, woody, unfamiliar. Maybe it was nothing at all. I told myself those are the noises of modern life. Slack pings, client crises, the never-ending, "Do you have a minute?" One afternoon, while we addressed envelopes at her kitchen island, a breeze slid through the screen and lifted the corner of an invitation. Vanessa wore a pale silk blouse and a new shade of lipstick that made her look both older and softer. She hummed along to the radio and corrected my zip codes with a grin. Her phone buzzed. She glanced, smiled down at it like at a private joke, then flipped it silently and asked if we'd ordered enough candles for the tables. It was such a small choreography. I might have missed it if I hadn't been the sort of sister who notices when someone shifts a picture frame half an inch. That night, after I'd gone home and rinsed the ink from my fingers, I lay awake and stared at the ceiling fan. Its slow blades chopped the air into quiet pieces. I told myself I was being unkind. Suspicion can feel like disloyalty if you were raised on grace. So I breathed and let the thought pass. Days folded into each other. The RSVP stack grew. The florist confirmed delivery windows. Michael called me about sourcing an outdoor heater in case the evening ran cold. "She wants everything perfect," he said with a kind of soft pride. "You should see the mood board." I said I would. I said I was happy for them. Both statements were true, and still like a faint hum coming from behind a wall, I felt something I couldn't name yet. Not fear, not certainty, just a pressure, the way you know before a storm by the taste of the air. I did what we do when we love people. I set another place at the table. I kept my eyes soft and my voice gentle. I told myself the most honourable thing you can do for a marriage that isn't yours is to pray for it and keep your hands out of it. But love, real love, the kind that protects, sometimes asks you to look closer. And soon, I would. It started on a Wednesday. The kind of day that feels harmless. Mild breeze, pale sunlight, a grocery list in my hand, and no reason to expect anything would shift. Michael had texted that morning, asking if I could drop off a box of old family photos for the slideshow Vanessa wanted to display at the vow renewal. He said he'd be home late, a last-minute work meeting, but Vanessa would be there to let me in. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed something odd. Her car was parked crooked, the passenger seat pushed far back. I thought maybe she'd been giving someone a ride, or maybe she was just distracted. The front door was unlocked, just as he'd said. I stepped inside, calling her name softly. The house smelled different, not like the citrus candle she always burned, but something sharper. Muskier, a man's cologne, and then I heard her voice, low, laughing. That kind of laughter that doesn't belong to family or friends. The kind reserved for secrets. I told you. You're going to get me caught, she said, her tone playful and breathy. Silence. Then a man's voice, low and confident. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I froze in the hallway, my fingers tight around the box of photos. My body was rigid, like even breathing might make a sound. She giggled again. Stop it, Carter. Carter. A name. I backed out quietly, heart pounding, the sound of their laughter chasing me all the way to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long minute, the photos still in my lap. My first instinct was denial, that protective reflex that says, there must be another explanation. But deep down, I knew what I'd heard. That night, I called my mother, half hoping she'd talk me out of it. Maybe it was nothing, she said softly. Maybe it's just the stress of planning the party. People act strange under pressure. I wanted to believe her, but the next few days only made the lie harder to swallow. Vanessa started cancelling plans, brunches, errands, fittings. She'd text, something came up, or work emergency. And each time, Michael would cover for her, brushing it off with a small laugh. She's juggling too much, she said. You know how driven she is. Yes, I knew. Driven, organised, calculated. One evening, while helping Michael finalise catering notes, her phone buzzed on the counter. She was upstairs showering. I didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up with a message preview that made my stomach twist. Can't stop thinking about last night, same time next week. The sender's name, Carter Hale. My hands went cold. I took a photo of the screen before it went dark. I wish I could say I didn't. But love sometimes makes us do the kind of things we later hide from ourselves. I didn't tell Michael that night. I watched him laugh while stirring pasta sauce, humming along to a song on the radio, completely unaware. It broke something inside me. Because betrayal doesn't just wound the people involved, it stains everyone who loves them. Over the next week, I started watching quietly. Not spying, exactly, just paying attention. The kind of attention you give when you already know the truth but need to see it written in full. Every Friday she stayed late at the office. Every Friday her car was gone until after 10. Once, I followed. Just once. She drove to a small boutique hotel near the river, one of those places that looks too romantic for business meetings. I parked a block away and waited. She didn't come out for nearly 2 hours. When she did, she wasn't alone. Carter. Same man. Sharp suit, loosened tie. He brushed her hair away from her face and kissed her right there on the curb. Casual, practiced, like it wasn't the first time. I don't remember driving home. Just the feeling. Cold, hollow, shaking hands, gripping the wheel. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of tea that went cold in my hands and thought about all the times I'd defended her. All the dinners she'd hosted, all the smiles she'd worn like armour. People always talk about how betrayal feels, the shock, the anger, but what they don't mention is the stillness that follows. That heavy, suffocating stillness where you realise the world you thought was solid is just glass pretending to be stone. I didn't tell Michael right away. I wanted proof. Not for me, but for him. Because if I said it out loud too soon, he'd defend her. He always would. So I waited. A week before the vow renewal, I stopped by to help him test the projector for the slideshow. Vanessa was out running errands. Or so she said. While he adjusted the brightness, I heard his phone buzz on the counter, a notification from their shared calendar. Dinner with Carter. Marketing follow-up. She'd even written it in plain sight, hiding the truth behind professionalism. I asked casually, "Who's Carter?" Michael smiled. "Oh, some guy from one of her projects." She says he's brilliant. Saved their campaign last year. Why? I shrugged. Just curious. He turned back to the projector, humming. I looked at him, this man who'd never once cheated, never once lied, who still opened doors and ironed his own shirts because it shows respect, and I knew that if I didn't act, he'd walk right into that party believing in a woman who was already halfway gone. That night I went home and gathered everything I'd collected. Screenshots, dates, a photo of her outside the hotel. I didn't want to humiliate her, not publicly. But I wanted her to face the mirror she'd been avoiding. That's when an idea came to me. It wasn't anger that drove it. It was clarity. The vow renewal, her masterpiece of control, her curated image, would be the moment truth finally took center stage. Vanessa had mailed all the invitations herself. I still had the digital template on my laptop from when I helped her format it. All I had to do was print 2 more. One for Carter Hale. And one for Mrs. Ziz. Carter Hale. I sealed them in matching envelopes, stamped them, and dropped them into the same outgoing mail slot she used. It wasn't vengeance. It was light. And sometimes light needs to burn before it heals. The days that followed felt heavy. I kept my distance. Michael called twice to confirm the playlist. He sounded excited, proud even. "She's really gone all out this time," he said. "Feels like a new beginning. It took everything in me not to break down right there." By the time the day arrived, I was calm. The kind of calm that comes after a long, painful storm. The backyard had been transformed into a garden of lights and champagne. Strings of white bulbs swayed in the evening breeze. The scent of roses mixed with roasted garlic and laughter. Music floated from the small live band near the patio. Michael looked sharp, navy suit, silver tie, that small nervous grin of his. And Vanessa, she looked like something out of a bridal catalogue. Ivory silk gown, soft curls, pearl earrings. The picture of devotion. If I hadn't known, I might have believed her too. As guests arrived, I stood quietly near the back, watching. Every handshake, every compliment felt like a small performance. Then, halfway through the evening, I saw them. Carter and his wife. They entered slowly, holding hands, confusion flickering in their eyes as they scanned the crowd. Vanessa saw them a second later. Her smile faltered. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked completely unprepared. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The band played on. The laughter faded. The air tightened. Michael, noticing her pale face, touched her arm. "You okay?" he whispered. She forced a laugh. "Just hot. Too many lights." But it was already too late. The stage she'd built so carefully was no longer hers. And I knew the truth was about to find its way to the microphone. The air shifted first, that strange, weightless pause before a storm breaks. It happened just after the dinner plates were cleared. The string lights above us swayed in the wind, and the singer at the piano began a slow, dreamy version of At Last. Michael stood to speak, holding the microphone with both hands, smiling the way a man does when he still believes in the room around him. 7 years, he began. People say that's the test. But I don't see it that way. 7 years is proof that we choose each other, not once, but every day. Guests clapped lightly. Vanessa dabbed at the corner of her eyes with a napkin, her smile picture perfect. I stood near the back, heart heavy, wondering if the truth would unravel on its own, or if it would need a nudge. Then, before Michael could continue, a sharp voice rose from the crowd. "Would you still say that?" a woman asked. "If you knew she's been choosing my husband, too?" It was Carter's wife. The room froze, forks dropped. Gasps rippled like a current. Vanessa went pale, her hand still clutching the napkin. Carter, standing near the fountain, stepped forward as if he could contain the moment, but the damage had already split open. "What are you talking about?" Michael asked, his tone steady but cold. The woman, I later learned her name was Elise, trembled as she held up her phone. "Maybe she should tell you what these are." She pressed play. And there it was, that laugh. The same one I'd heard in the hallway that day. Vanessa's voice, teasing, intimate. "You'll make me late again, Carter." Then a pause, and the soft sound of a kiss. A collective silence swallowed the backyard. Even the band stopped mid-note. Michael didn't move. His eyes never left Vanessa's. She tried to speak, to build one last lie from the ashes. "Michael, I swear." But he held up his hand. "Don't," he said quietly. "Not here." It wasn't anger in his voice. It was something heavier, a calm that comes only when the truth is too clear to fight. He handed the microphone back to the host, straightened his jacket, and stepped away from the table. Guests parted silently, letting him pass. Vanessa called his name once, twice. He didn't turn, and just like that, the celebration became a reckoning. People began whispering in corners. A few tried to help Vanessa gather herself, but she pushed them away. She sat alone at the head table, staring at the uneaten cake, her fingers still wrapped around the napkin like a lifeline. I didn't go to her. I just stood there, feeling something between sorrow and relief. When love collapses, it doesn't make the sound of breaking glass. It makes the sound of silence. By the time the night ended, only a few of us were left. Me, my mother, and 2 close friends who helped pack the leftover food. The smell of roses had turned sour in the humid air. The fairy lights flickered weakly, like they were tired too. Vanessa sat motionless. Mascara streaked, her phone glowing beside her with unanswered messages. I approached her slowly. "Natalie," she said in a trembling voice. "Did you know? I didn't lie." "Yes." She covered her face with both hands. "You did this? I didn't make you cheat, Vanessa," I said quietly. "I just made sure the truth had a seat at your table." She looked up at me then, eyes red, lips trembling. "You ruined my life." "No," I said, my voice low. "I just stopped helping you hide it." She didn't answer. She just turned her face away, as if even looking at me required more strength than she had left. I walked away before I could pity her. Michael didn't come home that night. He went straight to a motel on the edge of town. I knew because he texted me at 2 a.m. "I'm okay. Just need quiet." The next morning, the news had already made its rounds. Small towns have their own broadcast systems. Hairdressers, church circles, coffee shops. By noon, everyone knew. People stopped by my mother's house, some with casseroles, some with gossip disguised as concern. "He's such a good man," they'd say. How could she? I hated every word of it, because behind all the sympathy there's a strange kind of hunger, the way people feed on someone else's heartbreak to reassure themselves their own house is still standing. Vanessa tried calling him dozens of times. He didn't answer. 2 days later, I found her outside his office building, waiting by his truck. Her hair was unbrushed, her eyes swollen. "Natalie, please," she said, voice cracking. "Tell him I just need to talk." I shook my head. "He's not ready." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I needed to feel wanted. It was the first honest thing I'd ever heard her say. But honesty after destruction isn't redemption. It's confession to an empty room. Then tell that to God, I said softly. He's the only one who might still listen. She covered her face, sobbing. People passing by slowed down, pretending not to stare. I walked away, my stomach tight, my heart caught between justice and grief. Michael stayed with me for a month. My guest room became his refuge. Small, simple, quiet. Every morning, I'd hear him make coffee, then sit on the porch with the mug cupped in both hands, staring at nothing. The first week, he barely spoke. The second, he started fixing things. Shelves, light switches, a broken chair. I think he needed the sound of repair to drown out the noise of betrayal. One night, he looked at me and said, "You know what's strange? I'm not angry. I just feel emptied." "Maybe that's where healing starts," I said. He nodded slowly. "You know, for years I thought love was about forgiveness. Maybe it's about awareness. Seeing someone fully, even when it hurts." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the crickets. He eventually filed for divorce, quietly. No lawyers shouting, no vengeance, just a calm decision to end what had already ended. When the papers were signed, he took off his ring, set it on my kitchen counter, and said, "She made her choices. Now I'm making mine." He didn't look broken anymore, just free. Vanessa left town a few weeks later. No one really knows where she went. Her friends stopped mentioning her. Her social media accounts disappeared. Sometimes I think about that night, the string lights, the broken vows, the way Truth walked in dressed as a guest. And I realize it wasn't destruction. It was deliverance, because sometimes the only way to save someone is to let the world see what's been killing them in secret. Spring turned into summer before any of us really noticed. The dogwoods bloomed and shed again, and life, somehow, found a quieter rhythm. Michael rented a small house on the edge of town, not far from the river where we used to skip stones as kids. It had peeling white paint, creaky steps, and a patchy lawn, but it was his space, his silence. He started rebuilding his days the way you learn to breathe after running too far slowly, deliberately. Mornings with coffee and the newspaper. Long drives with no destination. Evenings fixing whatever didn't quite work. For the first time in years, he stopped performing stability and started living it. I'd visit on weekends. We'd sit on his porch talking about nothing. The weather, the tomatoes growing crooked in his garden, my mother's new obsession with crossword puzzles. He was thinner but steadier, his voice softer but grounded. "I think I used to confuse peace with quiet," he told me once. But peace is when nothing in you is waiting to be lied to. That line stuck with me. He wasn't bitter. That surprised me. He'd stopped asking why she did it, or how long it had been happening. I think he realized those answers couldn't rebuild anything worth keeping. There was no revenge fantasy, no dramatic showdown, just the slow, humane decision to let go. He sold the house they'd shared. My mother cried when she heard it had been the backdrop of so many family memories. But Michael said something that silenced us all. Houses don't hold love. People do. And when the people are gone, it's just wood and air. A few months later, he met someone. Her name was Erin. She worked at the local library, quiet, kind, with a dry wit that caught him off guard. She didn't flirt, she listened. Their connection wasn't fireworks. It was a slow light building in the dark, steady and real. When he first introduced us, he looked nervous, like a teenager again. "Erin, this is my sister Natalie," he said. She's why I'm still standing." Erin smiled warmly. "Then I already like you." They didn't rush anything. They went on long walks, attended small-town farmers' markets, talked about books and music instead of pain. She didn't fill his silence. She respected it. And that, I think, is what made the difference. One night, after they'd been seeing each other for a while, Michael told me something that I'll never forget. "I used to think I needed to be someone's everything," he said, "but now I just want to be someone's peace." There was no resentment in his voice. Only calm, only freedom. Vanessa tried reaching out once more. She sent him a handwritten letter, postmarked from another state. I found it on his counter a week later, unopened. "Are you going to read it?" I asked. He shook his head. "No need. She wrote her story already. I lived it." Then he tossed it into the fire pit out back, and we watched it burn to ash. Our family found its balance again slowly. Holidays felt different without her, less polished, more honest. We stopped using cloth napkins, started laughing louder, burned the rolls twice in a row and didn't care. Sometimes healing looks like imperfection, returning to the table. Mom said it best one evening as we cleaned up after dinner. "You can't rebuild trust for someone else," she said. "You can only make sure yours doesn't rust." Michael smiled at that. He'd stopped looking backward. His eyes were already set on tomorrow. That fall, he invited us all to his new house for dinner. The menu was simple: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and Erin's apple cobbler. Nothing fancy. But when I walked in, I realized something. This house had no ghosts, no carefully curated perfection, just warmth. As we sat down to eat, the sunset poured through the window, painting everything gold. Michael raised his glass of water and said quietly, "To lessons learned the hard way, and to people who loved us enough to let the truth hurt." Our mother teared up. I did too, because that was the thing, truth does hurt. But so does pretending. And sometimes the only way through the fire is to let it burn everything that was never real. Looking back now, I don't feel guilt for what I did. I feel peace. Vanessa's betrayal wasn't just about her, and Michael, it was a mirror for all of us. A reminder that pretending something is fine doesn't make it so. That silence can be as cruel as deceit. I don't believe in revenge. But I do believe in truth, the kind that sets you free, even if it sets your life on fire first. If I hadn't acted, my brother would still be trapped in a lie, loving a version of someone who never really existed. He deserved to know. We all do. Sometimes protecting someone means letting the world see what's been hidden in the dark. So when people ask if I'd do it again, if I'd send those invitations, if I'd let that night unfold the way it did, my answer is simple: yes. Because peace built on truth lasts longer than love built on lies. And in the end, that's all any of us are trying to find, something that doesn't shatter when the light hits it. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments.